Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Single best idea out on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, Apple, for inventing podcasts. It's a boom industry. Our theory is not like when we started this decades ago, which was really exciting to do that with Apple at the time, but to give you something short, like 6 minutes. And today I may even make it a little shorter. I'm fighting a plague. You can hear it throughout the tapes that we've got today. Thanks to the team, particularly Paul Sweeney, for putting up with it. But, you know, like everybody else, I'm medicated. Thank you to David Gura for tea from Brooklyn. It was different. It was sacred. It was the sacred vibe apothecary. It was very, I don't know what was in it. May have been some, beverage of my choice in it. Anyways, thank you, David Gura, for bringing in tea today. What a joy to speak to Richard Clarida. He was the dean of Columbia Economics. He brought Joe Stiglitz to Columbia, just to give you an idea of what really matters in bringing in faculty. It's where a dean can say, hey, come in. And was vice chairman of the Fed. He's a legit academic with his work on DSGE. But we talked to Richard Clarida, now at PIMCO, today about the path forward for the Fed, the theory underlying. Let's listen.
My sense, obviously, from public comments of not only the chair but the committee, is that they've understood, Tom, for some time that the shock was sufficiently unusual and substantial that they can and they are relying less on models and more on the way the data evolves. Tom, on one hand, the models were telling them that to get inflation down from 5.5 to 2 point something, they'd need to have a big increase in the unemployment rate. And both Governor Waller, Chair Powell, and others said, look, the economy may be different this time. We don't have to assume a big cratering in the labor market.
Richard Clarida and the Fed out of the pandemic, certainly an historic moment. I really can't say enough about the coverage of our team. Scott Landman leading our coverage in Washington through this really historic period. Moving right along to what we do, which is equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. In being in New York and not in London, Jon Ferro tells me this all the time, London's really where the commodities are. John happens to be correct. But with that said, out of London are all sorts of ability, not just in oil or, a couple other commodities that matter, but in what is called the softs, is the metals, copper, industrial, gold, and all that. But the softs is a huge part of the world. Kona Haque owns a high ground here. She's with EDF and Man, which literally goes back, I believe, to the American Revolutionary War. But Kona Haque is encyclopedic on what's going on in the cocoa boom and all that. And overlaying all of this, including in coffee, is the drought. John Tucker today had a superb news item, it was early in the day, about the warm April, the hot April so many are feeling. I saw that it's going to be 96 today in Manila, just as one example. It's very hot in Vietnam as well. Here's Kona Haque on coffee.
Coffee prices have risen sharply, and they were thinking, is this the next cocoa? Okay. And rightfully so. Again, fundamentals in the coffee supply-demand situation is very tight. We have Vietnam, which, again, heat stress and dryness has caused a shortage of Robusta, which is the stuff you eat for drink in espressos. So Robusta coffee is definitely tied in terms of supply-demand fundamentals. Arabica is produced in Brazil, but they also had, a couple of years of bad crops followed by frost. You don't get frost in Brazil. Exactly. That's very abnormal. We recovered from then, but then you had a bout of droughts, and you've just not had perfect weather, and this is a recurring theme.
Kona Haque of ED&F, man, there on coffee. Really good conversation. Speaking of that conversation, just out, we have the full replay of the show, 2 hours and 56 minutes. You'll see that 2-ish, 3-ish in the afternoon Wall Street time. We've had a huge request for this, particularly for those in the Mountain and the Pacific time zones. But there's a replay now of the entire 3-hour show, and look for that. Now, where do you look? Bloomberg Podcasts. It's just as simple as that. It's a building site in the new world of digital audio and media. We're building it out. Bloomberg Podcasts. And look there each and every day on YouTube for all of our different efforts. On Apple CarPlay as well and Android Play, download the Bloomberg Business app. To be clear, it is free to get Bloomberg on your radio. From New York, this is Single Best Idea.